What's up guys, my name is Ace, and the Modern Warfare 3 beta is now over, and today I wanted to share my final beta review and feedback that puts at least all of the main points together in one video. Now, for many of these points, I've made dedicated videos on them, and I'll just reference those as we go along. But without further ado, let's dive right into this, and I want to start it out with the good things. And this is going to be a shorter section just because it takes way less time to just list out the good things, the things I like about something, compared to discussing the negatives of things and providing feedback on them. But immediately with Modern Warfare 3, it just feels so refreshing with the movement. While they haven't necessarily increased movement speeds across the board, what they've done primarily with this is they've reduced or eliminated various penalties to movement that Modern Warfare 2 has. And even these subtle changes really free up movement a lot more, and they provide so many more tools for aggressive play, and I love that. Instead of just having jump shots available to us like we have in Modern Warfare 2 for aggressive play, now we've got jump shots, we've got slide cancels, we've got strafing to some degree, although I think there's some room for improvement there. And I've also noticed drop shotting is reasonably viable, so it's nice to have various tools, and you have to pick the right tool given the situation, and that just adds a lot more depth to the gunplay. And speaking of gunplay, when the connection was good, I was enjoying the gunplay and the time to kill quite a bit in Modern Warfare 3. I like the fact that we've got reduced visual recoil from Modern Warfare 2, so you can actually see your target for the most part as you're actively shooting at them and make those adjustments in real time rather than just kind of guessing where your enemy is the moment you fire your first shot. Like I said, we've got more movement options as well, and there's actual gunfights with this slower time to kill, at least on a reasonably fair connection, and I think you can already tell what one of the bad things is going to be. Additionally, for the good, so far, I'm liking the looks of the perk structure, although we really need to see all of the vests and all of the perks before we get the full picture on what we're going to be seeing. So I can't really give a final review on the perk system that's being used, but at the very least, this is significantly better than what we have in Modern Warfare 2. Also, while this may be a little bit controversial, I love the fact that we have a footstep dampening perk in the game. It feels so freeing to be able to actually stealthily flank enemy players, and it's also refreshing that if you are using a class with those covert sneakers, it's refreshing to not be constantly pre-fired by people that are just sitting in a corner with their headset cranked up so they can know my exact location in real time without ever actually seeing me. And speaking of classic elements that are returning, I love the fact that the classic minimap is back. Also, the classic maps themselves. I'm really enjoying playing on these old maps again. I hope they don't get stale too fast. And also, I should mention, the flow on these maps was completely screwed throughout the beta due to spawns, but the maps themselves look great, and I was actually enjoying using some new movement mechanics on these maps too, so I could approach them in a little bit of a different way than back in the day with Modern Warfare 2. Additionally, getting into the gunsmith, I like the fact that they mixed up the attachment pros and cons compared to the Modern Warfare 2 guns. I was really worried they were literally just going to port over all of the Modern Warfare 2 attachments for the Modern Warfare 3 guns, and nothing would really change there, but they have mixed things up, and I love the fact that we've got new attachments to learn, and so far, I think there's more interesting combinations of pros and cons, and I like that. After that, tac stands. It's a neat addition to the game. I think it may be a little on the gimmicky side. I'm not too sure how much I'm actually going to utilize it, but I do think it's a positive addition to the game nonetheless. Then for just a bunch of really little things that do add up to improving the experience a bit, I love the fact that we don't have that explosive stun effect where it prevents you from sprinting like in Modern Warfare 2. Map voting return, reload cancel return. I love the fact that the kill cams actually show all of the class items that player is using, including attachments. Whereas in Modern Warfare 2, I think the perks are still not displaying properly, especially with their charge status. Additionally, the Breacher drone, I think that's a pretty cool addition in the lethal category. I didn't think I'd like it at first, but I do think it's really interesting and fairly balanced as well due to how slow it tends to move and how visible it is. And one final thing I'll mention here, since I have been picking on Modern Warfare 2 a little bit, something I really like that they brought from Modern Warfare 2 is the ability to toggle between kill streaks and score streaks. I love that, and I hope this becomes a staple going forward for Call of Duty. So there we go. There's just a handful of the things that stood out to me that I'm really liking about Modern Warfare 3 so far based on the beta. And in general, the feel of the game is already much better than Modern Warfare 2, at least for me as somebody that likes to play a bit more on the aggressive side. So this beta has shown a ton of potential with this game, and I think there's a lot to like about it. However, there are certain areas where work is absolutely needed, and it was definitely rough around the edges in certain ways. So let's get into the negatives, or the feedback section of this. Again, I expect this to be a much longer section, not because I dislike the beta more than I like the beta, just because it takes longer to provide feedback than it does to list out positives. And let's start this off with the big things, the things that had the biggest negative impact on my experience with the beta. And number one will be no surprise to many of you, this was the spawns. The spawns are the number one biggest gameplay issue in the game right now, and if they don't get into a good place, then I'm actually pretty worried for the game because I don't know how much longer I could have handled these spawns. I tried my best to overlook it while playing through the beta because I know spawns take some time to tune and adjust, and I didn't expect any major adjustments throughout the beta of the game, so I just tried to accept that while focusing on other elements of the game. But if the spawns are going to be anything like this at launch, then that has me very concerned because they have a massive impact on how the game plays. Now, I'm not going to get into details here since I made a very detailed video with examples already, so I will leave that link down below if you guys want to check out exactly what's going on with spawns. But it is worth noting, after that video, we got the second weekend of the beta with High Rise, and High Rise was actually worse than the other maps, especially in Domination. There are some very clear issues when it comes to the spawn design in this game. It's far too flippy in its current state, and map control means essentially nothing, and it kind of just feels like every mode is almost like free-for-all. You never know what direction enemies are coming from, and that honestly felt terrible. So this is something that I think needs to be a very high priority for them, and I'm really hoping we see noticeable improvements by the time the game launches, because this was a rough experience. As for the next big negative area, I'm just going to combine this into matchmaking / connection quality. In my experience, this was just wildly inconsistent on a game-to-game basis. It's like you're playing a different game from one game to the next. One game on a controller, your aim assist seems to be working just fine as intended. You're able to hit your shots just fine. It seems like the enemies are reacting in the appropriate amount of time and taking the appropriate number of shots to be able to kill you, at least from your perspective. And things either seem fair and balanced, or sometimes you even feel like you're that untouchable god that nobody's able to hit, and you yourself have perfect hit detection. Then, literally the next game, it's the complete opposite. It feels like your aim assist is not working properly at all, so it's just a very inconsistent aiming experience there. You'll also get people that apparently have inhuman reaction time, like the moment they see you, they're already reacting and putting shots into you. And there's also a huge inconsistency in the feeling of time to kill versus time to die. So it can feel like you die in literally 2 bullets on your end, whereas for you, it's taking the appropriate number of shots to kill, and that's obviously not going to be a fun experience when you have that desync between players. Now, I strongly believe this is at least partially due to their matchmaking system, the engagement optimized or skill-based matchmaking system they're using. As far as I've been able to tell, this system is willing to sacrifice your best possible connection quality in order to put you into a more appropriate skill or recent performance match. And the reason I say that is when I turned on my NetDuma geofilter, so my router has a geofilter that allows me to block off any servers aside from my closest server location for Call of Duty, this immediately improved the consistency of my good connections. Now, it wasn't flawless. I would still have a bad connection experience sometimes. Even though my ping was low, there would still be very obvious desync where some players had a clear connection advantage. But it was amazing how much of an impact that had when I was able to force the connection onto my closest server, which for many games is an option in the menus, and I feel that's the way the game should be handling things. It should always be trying to put you on that closest possible server with the best possible connection, and this system doesn't do that by default. Now, alongside this, I'm not going to go on my full-on rant here, but I have to bring this up despite the fact that I've beaten this horse to death many times over the years. The strength of the skill-based or recent performance-based matchmaking system is way too high for regular public matches with no visible rank involved. It truly feels this isn't a skill-based matchmaking system that's designed to flatten things out and make for a fair and balanced experience. Instead, it involves wild swings not only in the connection quality, but also in the lobby strengths, and it truly feels like a punishment to get good at the game. It makes it that much more difficult to party up with friends that are at a different skill level. It throws any variety out the window if you get into those higher skilled lobbies. You can't really use anything but the meta weapons if you want to be able to hold your own in those lobbies. So branching out and experimenting with off-meta things is just out of the question in those lobbies. Like I touched on briefly, it seems like your connection experience also gets worse the better you get at the game, which should never be a thing, especially in an unranked mode where you can't even tell where you stand. And it truly feels like a completely different game on one account versus another, and I don't think that should be the case. I'd like to see a lot more of a mix involved here. And while I think some level of skill-based matchmaking is totally fine to protect those brand new players or the lowest of low-skill players, in the state we've been experiencing in recent years, this is cranked way too high in my opinion. And just tagging on to that, since this is something that really exacerbates that issue, and it's another serious issue with modern COD, in my eyes at least, this is the disbanding lobbies, the fact that you can never stay with a lobby. There's no option to stay in the lobby and have a rematch against those people, and that destroys so much of the community aspect of the game, the storytelling on a session-to-session basis rather than a game-to-game basis, and that obviously also contributes to that wild inconsistency on a game-to-game basis when it comes to your connection or lobby strength. So there we go. That's another big element that is holding back Modern Warfare 3 and has been holding back all of the recent Call of Duty games as well. I don't know how much control, if any, Sledgehammer has over this, and I honestly don't anticipate any major changes, but I'm not going to stop talking about it because I do feel it holds Call of Duty back a lot. Now, moving on to another somewhat big thing, I would say. It's not nearly as big as something like spawns, but I still consider it to be one of the bigger issues. This is target identification. And what I mean by that is when you come across a character model, the ability to nearly instantly know that that is either a teammate or an enemy. Now with this, they already made a bit of an improvement from week 1 to week 2. They added a name tag above the red diamond on enemy players. And while I appreciate that, and that definitely helped a bit, I still think there's room for improvement here because those name tags are really hard to see when there's a brighter background, especially like the sky on high rise, for instance. Those name tags blend in super hard to bright backgrounds, so it's just really inconsistent. Sometimes they pop just fine against a dark background, and other times you can't see them at all. Like, you have to lean right in and really squint hard to tell if that's a teammate or an enemy, and that shouldn't be the case in my eyes. So I think the solution to this is quite simple. Just add a stroke or a drop shadow on the name tag and the diamond or dot, and perhaps just increase the opacity a little bit on those as well. Now, on a similar note here, there's another issue that thankfully has been acknowledged, so I do expect a fix for this at launch. This is the fact that teammate footsteps seem just as loud, if not louder sometimes, than enemy footsteps. And that's just not normal for the Call of Duty franchise. Typically, teammate footsteps will sound a little different from enemy footsteps, so that's just an additional cue that helps you identify targets. In the past, if you had a counter UAV up, for instance, and you heard footsteps behind you, you could tell that that was a teammate without having to do a full 180 to check, and that wasn't the case in the Modern Warfare 3 beta. And with that, those are honestly the biggest complaints I had with the Modern Warfare 3 beta. Those are the things I feel really need some work. However, I do have a list of other things that I feel have room for improvement. Some of these are super nitpicky, other ones are just sort of regular pieces of feedback. And the first one here is weapon balance. It did seem a little bit rough throughout the beta. The striker was way too dominant in the first weekend of the beta. I think they toned it down nicely for the second weekend. The MCW is probably the next one that needs starting, or the ACR. Overall, I'm sure they will be implementing data that they collected throughout the beta to balance some of the weapons, but at the end of the day, we didn't have access to all of them, so hopefully they stay on top of weapon balance, especially with the Modern Warfare 2 guns coming into play. I'm very curious to see what weapon balance looks like, but time will tell on that one. After that, hazy visuals. I made a video talking about this over the weekend, and while I think you can get this game looking good, like you might see in the background, I've actually done a little bit of color correction and contrast adjustments, and I would say, like in my gameplays, for instance, the game looks quite good. However, out of the box, without any sort of color correction, it is quite hazy. It seems like there's a persistent fog on every one of the maps that unnecessarily washes things out and really flattens the image, and just makes for kind of an ugly looking game, at least in my opinion. So if they could cut down on that a little bit, I think that could go a long way. Next, perk balance. Even though I like the general structure of the perks, I think there's room for improvement with some of them. And again, I did make a dedicated video on this if you guys want to see all the details, but I just think like certain perks like stalker boots, for instance, could use a bit of a buff. I don't think that's enough of a buff to justify using those. And there's also various perks that just seem to not be working properly, like the bone conduction headset that was boosting teammates' footstep audio when I don't believe that's supposed to be happening, or the LR detector. I still don't even know what that does at this point. It didn't seem to be working the way it was meant to be working though. Next up, let's get into a really minor one, but I did find this to be quite annoying several times throughout the beta. And this involves calling in an SAE, where you pull out that tablet, you select your locations, and as far as you're aware, you select that last location, you put the tablet away just like you called in the streak, only to realize you still have that streak and it didn't call it in because someone else had just called an SAE in. And I just found that to be an unnecessary frustration, especially because you get an indicator blocking you from even opening the tablet if somebody else is using the tablet, but that doesn't seem to be working consistently. I think it should be first come, first serve. Whoever opens that tablet up first blocks that for anybody else, and therefore they can select their locations and call that streak in uninterrupted. And speaking of calling in streaks, another frustrating issue was with the counter UAVs. A lot of the times you try to call it in and it says there's not enough space. Thankfully, this is yet another area where Sledgehammer has already acknowledged this, so I suspect we'll be seeing a fix for this with the launch of the game. After that, something I have mentioned in a previous video, I would really like to have a setting to toggle off the UI element when you aim down sight that tells you that you can toggle into the tactical stance. I would love to be able to get rid of just that UI element while still being able to utilize tac stance. I know what button I need to hit, I don't need it to constantly be popping up in the middle of my screen above my gun every single time I aim down sight. Next, another thing I noticed, along with many others, is the announcer was really inconsistent and would apparently never announce when an enemy UAV was in the air, and I think that is important information to be gaining. Again, this is something they have acknowledged on their Trello, so I suspect we'll be seeing a fix for this at launch. After that, bullet penetration. I just found in this game there were certain areas where bullet penetration seemed to be not consistent with what you would expect. It would be a super light piece of cover, so you'd think maybe it'll take you like 1 or possibly 2 extra shots to kill, and yet you just get hit marker after hit marker after hit marker. So perhaps that's something I could take a look at. Honestly, I do prefer this over the paper maps that Call of Duty Vanguard had, where it seemed like you could punch through just about anything, even like thick steel or brick, and still deal considerable damage. But in either case, just something I noticed while playing through this. Another fairly minor thing, but would be nice to see improvement with, is teammate-player collision. I was getting pushed around quite a bit by my teammates. It seems like that collision box is a little too big in its current state. I've had teammates blocking doorways and stuff as well, especially while prone. They can really block you hard, so if they could cut down on that just a little bit, I think that would be a nice improvement as well. And one last thing I want to mention on this section is the UI still sucks. I'm sorry, I don't like this UI. It doesn't seem to be popular in the community either. You shouldn't have to tab within a tab within a tab to get to a setting. You shouldn't have those long horizontal menus that you have to scroll through in order to find the option you want when you could display all of the options in a vertical format. I don't anticipate we're seeing much changes to this, but I still want to express the fact that I don't like this UI and I'm not alone with this. And with that, I just want to add one additional section here, which is basically my additional ideas or wants for the game, where this isn't necessarily feedback for things I want changed with the game, it's just features or things that I'd like to see added to the game on top of what we already have. And the first thing, and one of my biggest hopes for this game, is the Specialist Strike package, where instead of earning your kill streak rewards, you earn perks as you continue to go on a streak and get kills within the same life. This is something I've really been missing for the past couple of years of Call of Duty, and it's something I feel adds so much more depth and replayability to the gameplay. I really miss this. The original Modern Warfare 3 introduced this to Call of Duty, so I'm hoping this version of Modern Warfare 3 brings it back. Now, at this stage, it's either going to be in the game or not at launch. Like, if they haven't already created the system, obviously it's not going to be there for launch. But if they haven't created specialists for the game yet, even down the road, this would be great to see at some point. Next up, something I'd like to see that I think would be a fairly easy add is the kill counter. As you go on a streak, I'd like to see exactly what my kill streak is after every single kill on the bottom center of my screen somewhere. We've seen this in previous games. Modern Warfare 2 had it in the beta and then removed it for some reason for the launch of the game, and that was really disappointing. I'd love to see them bring that back for Modern Warfare 3, even if you put it on the toggle in the menu and have it off by default. Those that want to turn it on could turn it on, and those that don't can leave it off. Additionally, another quality of life feature I'd love to see at some point added to the game is showing the amount of damage that I dealt to an enemy when watching a kill cam. I do really like the fact that they display how much damage was dealt to me on the top right of the screen by various people, because that can often help explain what happened in a situation. But taking that even further, I'd love to see the entire picture of what happened by also seeing how much damage I dealt to the enemy player. And finally, for new features I'd like to see that I have on my list here, something that we lost with Call of Duty over the years was the ability to wrap streaks. So you could earn multiple of the same streaks in the same life if you just kept going on a bigger and bigger streak. And as much as I may not like that they did that, I also understand what they're going for. They don't want a single player in the lobby just cycling through like chopper gunner after chopper gunner and just completely smashing the lobby. I may not agree with it, but I totally get what they're going for there. However, I would like to offer a compromise if this is something that's viable, and that is, I'd love to see non-lethal kill streaks wrappable while just making lethal kill streaks non-wrappable. So if I have a UAV on, for instance, once I get to my highest streak, I can start working toward my next UAV without having to die and respawn again. I can just continue cycling through those. However, any one of my lethal streaks, the moment you earn them once, it just eliminates them from the pool until I die and respawn. I think this would be excellent, especially for those players that want to go for the MGBs or the nukes in the game. I think it's totally fair as well, and it helps with team play, because these non-lethal streaks are helping the entire team out, rather than just heavily rewarding that one single player with a ton of free kills. It's something that would actually encourage team play and encourage people to use more of these support-style streaks. Again, just a random idea, take it or leave it, I just wanted to throw it out there. And with that, that is going to wrap it up for today's video with my final beta review and feedback of Modern Warfare 3. Honestly, overall, I do feel like this game has a lot of potential. I actually think it has the potential to be the best of the modern Call of Duty games, like Modern Warfare 2019 and on, but only if they can get some of the bigger issues worked out, especially the spawns. If the spawns don't improve drastically, this game will probably end up falling flat for me, and that's how important the spawns are to me, at least. And then on top of that, if they can't get the consistency of the connection down, that's also going to be a big stain on the game that will significantly hold it back. Now, thankfully, aside from those areas and a handful of minor like bug fixes and tweaks and stuff, I'm actually really liking how Modern Warfare 3 is shaping up. There aren't like a bunch of core gameplay systems that I feel need to be completely reworked to get the game in a good state, outside of spawns like I've been saying. And that feels good after playing with the really stubborn decisions that Infinity Ward stuck with Modern Warfare 2. And with that, that is going to wrap it up. And of course, all of these have just been my opinions on the beta so far. It's totally fine if you guys disagree with any of them. And if you do, please let me know in those comments down below. And also, if you have any additional feedback you wanted to provide, please leave it down in those comments as well. And if there's enough of them that I feel like I missed out on in this video, because I'm sure I missed some little things at least, perhaps I'll even do a follow-up feedback video. If you enjoyed this one, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.